you know, you're hearing me, and I'm really, really, you know, so pleased to be able to join you all. And I think it's really significant that so many people have come to be part of this forum today, and I think that's an indication of how important this issue is, I think, for Malaysia, and I think we all know that. I just heard the end of your introduction while we were trying to fix up the line, and I really do want to say, you know, yes, I've been prominent in this story, but there are so many other, you know, fantastic journalists who've been involved in digging away at the 1MDB story. Malaysian-based journalists, you know, working under really difficult conditions, really, given there's been so little transparency on this story. So I think we all owe a tribute to, for example, the Edge newspaper, Malaysia Kini Business, The Star. Many journalists have done very good work on this. Now, I sort of came because I know I've written a lot and it's quite complicated. And you know, I've had the advantage of poring over documents and things that you've only had limited access to. So I'm here to answer questions, really, if they're coming. But the organisers did ask me to just sort of give a few words first, you know, really about my impression from having looked at this story over the last few weeks. So I'll do that. You know, if I go on too long, someone will butt in and tell me to shut up. But you know, I think my sort of overall impression and my observation, and I think it's, I'm sure the same with all of you in the room, is how, you know, how did a 20-something spid like Joe Low get to be in such a position of influence in Malaysia? How was it that this young guy ended up directing major economic decisions, and in such a peculiar conspiratorial way? I mean, the language of some of those emails is jaw-dropping, and you know, and if you go on, I mean, he wasn't just involved in making decisions for 1MDB. He was involved in foreign affairs, diplomacy, writing letters that the Prime Minister sent to the heads of state in Saudi Arabia. I mean, these were his claims, and you know, unfortunately, the letter that we saw him send by email was very much reproduced in the media in Malaysia later. So the content of whatever correspondence did go on to Saudi Arabia, you know, was very much the same. So something's gone wrong, and I think, you know, I've thought about this, and I think there are certain sort of key things that appear, certainly from my observation point, to have gone wrong. And the first, I think, is an over-concentration of power. I mean, there seems to be, you know, the checks and balances have been eroded to such an extent in Malaysia. I mean, the idea that your Prime Minister is your Finance Minister, I mean, why do you think you have two positions? Why are there two positions? And why is it a good idea that the same person should occupy both? That's something that, you know, has you know, of course, also to chair the 1MDB, which really should have been an independent body, run independently, another check and balance. Another thing that sort of struck me very strongly is the lack of robustness in your institutions. I mean, Malaysia does have strong institutions, and Malaysia has a great deal of talent, a strong professional class, accountants, lawyers, you know, bankers. You've got the, you know, you've got the manpower, you've got the institutions. So why are those? The other thing that has struck me is the lack of transparency with regard to all this. Politicians like Tony and Rafizi, and indeed your own, you know, UMNO's own Dr. M, they've all asked very valid questions, and those answers should have been available in the public paperwork. You know, the reports should have been delivered, they should have been transparent. None of the proper answers have been coming back. That's just been constant brush off. And anyone who you know, digs deeper or asks more is treated not as a helpful critic or as someone who, is doing useful work as they should on the issue, but as somehow as a traitor. And again, that seems to be wrong. It's not how other countries, other democracies expect to work. And of course, the last thing, particularly from my perspective, I think a problem has been the muzzled media. The media in Malaysia seems to be overly obedient. For this reason, blogs like myself, the internet, have a massive importance, because it's the only way that issues like this can be objectively discussed, because the media seems to just be printing what it's told to print, and I think that goes for the broadcast media too. And I'm sure most people in this room know that NGOs that sort of focus on these issues, media freedom, have rated Malaysia, on a downward trajectory in recent years in this aspect. And if you're going to be a democracy, a free media is an absolute foundation for that. You cannot have a functioning democracy if people are frightened to say what they have found out, or to what they think even. The argument should defeat them, not a sedition charge. So these are the things that have struck me, and there seems to be an attitude that strong government is a good thing, and that these all go for strong government. But I would say that these issues I've referred to, this over-concentration of power and lack of robust institutions, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I think that's what 1MDB has turned out to be, a very expensive disaster for Malaysia, because nobody was able to call the whistle on this little guy, or this chubby guy, who had got right into the heart of government, clearly. For reasons that will come out, and I think we know a lot of the reasons why he had so much influence. But in a more open, strong, check and balance setup, he'd have been flushed out, sorted out, and put in his place a long time previously. There's one other sort of issue. I hope you do manage now to have a really good investigation, a proper investigation into 1MDB. And when those Malaysian authorities take on this case and investigate, I would very much hope that they have a good hard look at the foreign facilitators being involved in this. A lot of bankers, lawyers, international accountancy and other professionals that the Malaysian public had a right to expect them to do an honest professional job, and not to be swayed by people in positions of power into bending the rules, or even worse. And I think there's enough evidence that a number of people with professional qualifications and standing in the United States, in Britain, have failed their clients, in this case the Malaysian people who finance 1MDB, and they should be gone after. I think the Malaysian authorities should ask the regulators in those countries to go after professionals who have facilitated corruption, I think it is fair to say. So that's another issue, I think, that has been at the root of this problem that has manifested itself in 1MDB. Now, just really to give you a bit of background as to how I got involved, I write a book about Sarawak, and I focus on environmental issues, indigenous rights issues, because I've identified a major problem there, and I grew up in Sarawak, and I care very much about the very, very harsh conditions that many people live in there, and indeed the wanton destruction of what was an amazing environment that Malaysia should really cherish and be proud of. So I soon, I guess, looking at these issues, began to realise that at the root of the problem was corruption. A country that was run for the benefit of a handful of people who were in charge, who were entrusted by the people to run the affairs honestly, were in fact running it just for their own enrichment. And I've said this openly many times, and you know, I've done a lot of investigative work to back up those statements. So you have a country where, you know, there's great poverty because in the name Hello? Am I back? Yes. Hello, am I back? Yes. I don't know where I got cut off. Oh. I don't know where I got cut off there, but I was trying to make the point that corruption, you know, the greatest victims of corruption are the poorest people. They often don't understand how they end up being, you know, the worst victims of corruption. You know, this is something that needs to be understood, you know, not just amongst the poorer people themselves, but, you know, amongst the better off, because people tend to ignore corruption when it really does have a very pernicious effect. In Sarawak, you see people with inadequate healthcare, inadequate education, inadequate roads and infrastructure, in a country where there's a lot of money to be made, and a lot of money has been made. And you know, their poverty is caused by selfish corruption. So this is a drum that I've been banging, and you know, and I do that by chasing stories. And so in the course of chasing stories, I suppose inevitably knocked up against 1MDB. 1MDB in a way had its genesis in Sarawak, and people who've been following the story will know that the bailout of UPG Bank, the Thai family-owned bank, is very much at the heart of the genesis of 1MDB. That early money, that very first loan that was made to Petrosaudi, the evidence is compelling that money filtered its way through Good Star, which is a company controlled by Jono, and into the buyout of UBG, in which he himself had an interest. And there's a plethora of correspondence, emails that show really exactly what happened. And if a half-decent investigation does get put underway, I'm sure that evidence will be made available, and it will be clear for all to see. So as a Sarawak-oriented reporter, I've been interested in 1MDB for some time. And of course, that goes back to 2010. We're now in 2015, and I've kept a weather eye on this story, as have other excellent financial journalists in Malaysia, to whom I and all of us are indebted for having taken what information there was and beavered away and unpicked what appeared to be going on. I obviously find story material from all sorts of areas, and in 2013 I came by the Goldman Sachs bond issue for one of the power plants for that 1MDB bought up. Now that's a document that I haven't been able to distribute widely because it's a very sensitive document and could have fingerprints on it. So but I've been able to release enough of the details in order to reveal, you know, that there are a lot of major concerns in the way that money has been raised for 1MDB. Then again, in the winter of 2013, Christmas of that year, the whole Wolf of Wall Street story emerged, and you know, that's really extraordinary. That was just extraordinary to cover because, you know, if Mr. Joe Low and his friends were slightly more discreet, you know, frankly, it would have been less of an easy story for people like myself to cover. But the man made a complete spectacle of himself all over America and Europe, and therefore, you know, it was fairly easy to trace. Someone pointed out to me over Christmas 2013 that the wife of the Prime Minister was promoting this film as something suitable for school children to watch as a morality tale. And that was enough really to set me looking through the internet. And of course what I found was that her son was the producer of the film, that Joe Low was intimately involved in the whole project, that hundreds of millions of dollars were being expended on this picture project, this Hollywood project. So I asked a question really, which was how was all this being afforded? And it was a valid question. It was a perfectly straightforward article, carefully written, just revealing the situation and asking, where did the money come from? I was met with a legal onslaught from Riza Aziz's lawyers, you know, threatening letters, bullying. It was really over the top. And frankly, you know, I mean, I live in a free country and we have a court system, so I invited them to utilize it. They did not. They went away. But that kind of aggressive, bullying, I suspect is the sort of thing that reporters have to put up with in Malaysia. And I really feel for them, and I don't think it does, the state of Malaysia any good at all to have that sort of bullying attitude towards people who ask perfectly valid questions. So my interest had therefore been focused on this issue, and I took a trip to Hollywood, which was nice. It was January and the weather was sunny, so that was good. And I started meeting up with people and finding out a little bit more about this Red Granite Pictures that was producing Wolf of Wall Street. And by the time I'd done my inquiries and found a few multi-million-dollar properties in Beverly Hills, which I was able to establish belonged to these guys, I realized that the makers of Wolf of Wall Street, were far more interesting in the same direction than the film itself. I mean, you couldn't make it up. Really, maybe one day there'll be a Hollywood movie about Joe Low. So I wrote about that too. And I've been writing, as have other excellent financial journalists, been writing about this over the subsequent year. I'll shut up in a minute and hope that some questions might come my way. But as we all know, 1MDB's finances have caught up with the people running this enterprise, and those are to do with economic issues and I guess the loss of confidence. I think there's still a view that the resources of Malaysia will be it will be ploughed into bailing out 1MDB, and no one will ask awkward questions about, what happened. Well, we found the money, we plugged the gaps, it's all fine. Why ask about where the original money went? That seems to be the way that this is being handled. But right now, the gaps are not plugged, and there is an economic crisis caused by this massive indebted fund. which really makes the questions that are being put by Tony and Rafizi, Dr. Mahathir, numerous economic experts, it makes them extremely relevant. And, you know, obviously I think this, you know, what has gone wrong, it's very important to find out what's gone wrong and to sort out the problems that have allowed this to happen. So I picked up this story again because I through asking lots of questions, learned that there was information out there, and I've obtained a number of sources of information now, as you're aware, that have enabled me to shed a great deal more light on what has happened, and I've laid that all out. And my goodness, it's been quite fascinating to write about this. Extraordinary to find out what went wrong through looking through the information, and indeed today I've started to publish a story that comes out of 1MDB, which is based on a whole new set of information, really quite extraordinary. And what it does is connect up one of 1MDB's biggest joint venture fund partners, supposedly, with Jolo's company, Good Star. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read, look at the pictures of my story that I've just put out in the last few hours, but it's quite interesting, and what I've been able to share with you so far has been that for reasons as yet unexplained, but which I think should be explained, the company Good Star, which I identified as being controlled by Jolo, and so far no one has denied that Good Star is controlled by Jolo, and no one has denied that there were payments adding up to nearly $1 billion that went from 1MDB's bank account into Good Star's bank account directly during 2009 and 2010. Why is it that 20 million plus of that Good Star account was paid into the personal bank account of the head of the ABAR Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund in February 2012? I think given what we know about 1MDB, given what we know about Good Star, I think that's a valid question, and I should be allowed to ask it and expect an answer from the parties involved. So I think that's probably, as much as I need to sort of say at this stage. I don't know what parts of the story have been perhaps confusing to follow, and I don't know if I'm, going to be any better at, dispelling any confusion. But I'm happy to take questions. If there's anything that people want me to elaborate on.
Thank you very much, Claire. Claire, don't go away yet, because we'll have a few questions for you from Tony first, and then we can take 2 questions from the floor. Do you have questions for Claire? Yes, I see one. Any more? Yeah, okay, great. So, okay, great. So we'll take questions from the floor first. Can I give, this gentleman here, and then YBC Barasa next. Anyone else? Questions for Claire? Okay, we'll take the 2 first.
Madam Clare, Rewcastle. My name is Krishnamurthy, a freelance journalist. My question is 2-part. One is how serious we think the appointment of the Auditor General is. It could go, 1, it's delaying time, it's a PR move, or 2, it could penalize and punish Jolo. That's the first question. The second question is, as a journalist, we keen, and Malaysians are keen, how did these emails leak, and how we must congratulate you. And how congratulate you for the great effort. What excess, some people in Malaysia are talking about whether Dr. Mahathir paid for these leaks. Thank you.
Second bit first, you're a journalist, so you know that I will not reveal my sources on this because given the sensitivity, it's not surprising that the people who've released information to me do not wish to be identified. But the insinuation you made, no, I didn't get any money out of Dr. Mahathir. I didn't ask for it either, actually. That's, you know, I have to actually say something, which is that a lot of people have taken a lot of risks to provide information in the public interest on this story, and their courage and their sacrifice should be recognised. So, you know, on the Auditor General's inquiry, I very much hope he does do a good inquiry, but it does seem to me, certainly, to be a classic move to kick this into the grass. You know, an inquiry that you can control and that can take simply ages is absolutely the politicians', you know, kind of fallback sort of method when they have a really awkward scandal that they need to keep a lid on for as long as possible. I know what, we'll have an inquiry, nobody else talk about it until the experts who I've got, you know, who I've chosen and I control, you know, have said what they're going to say, and then I'll just spend the next few years pressurizing that inquiry into moderating what it says, and, you know, we'll just put that, we'll freeze it that way, and, you know, that's not something that's particularly Malaysian, you know, resource. I can think of plenty of British, you know, examples of where that's happened. So I think the pressure should be kept up because I think the Malaysian public deserve better than that, and I think that you know, people who have acted, you know, in a way they shouldn't should be exposed and pressured, and you know, and when appropriate, people should resign. There have been a lot of people that have you know, have acted out of their remit in this matter. So I think that you know, there should be pressure for certainly the Public Accounts Committee to have a very vigorous investigation of this, and everyone. They should expect to be able to interview everyone on this matter. And I think the police should look at it too.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the second question?
Thank you, Cynthia. Clare, my name is Sivarasa, Member of Parliament with PKR. My question is regarding the actual transaction by which 700 million US was paid to Joe Low's company, Gold Star, from the 1MDB joint venture company. Let me just state the facts quickly. There was a 1MDB Petro Saudi was the joint venture company set up. We, in other words, 1MD Malaysia pumps in 1 billion US into that company. Petro Saudi pumps in zero, not even 1 cent. And the interesting thing which you have exposed is that 700 million US then goes out of the joint venture company towards Gold Star, Jolo's company. And this is done in the name of paying back a loan. In other words, on paper, you try to justify the payment by dressing it up as a repayment of a loan. Now, the only problem for them is the creditor, the person who lent the money to the JV company, was the holding company of Petro Saudi. My question to you is, so my question is, and based on the documents you have, and you probably have a lot more documents than most of us have ever seen, was there ever a real loan from this holding company to the joint venture company? In other words, was there a real loan? Was that 700 million actually disbursed as a loan? And the funny thing about this loan is, 4 days later after lending the money, they demanded the money back. So based on that demand back, the joint venture company then pays 700 million, not to the creditor, it pays it to Cholo's company. This is the mystery about it all.
Exactly.
So, my factual question is this, because if there was never a real loan, there may be a loan on paper, but if there was no real loan of 700 million, money was never disbursed, then that entire transaction is criminal. It's CBT. And somebody needs to go to jail for a long, long time because of that.
Well, I have to say there's no evidence.
You want to respond to that first? I've got 2 more questions.
I'll just respond very... My brain isn't very good at answering simple questions at once, particularly on a complicated matter like this. There's no evidence in the documentation that there was a loan. A scrappy loan document was drawn up in the week that all this was put together. Don't forget, this $1 billion deal was pulled together in a week, just over. And that included an assessment, a valuation of the company by an American banker that took him about 3 days, and he valued the company at over nearly $3 billion. So what I've seen in the documentation is that White and Case, a reputable London lawyer, drew up a document that signalled a loan had been granted by PetroSaudi Holdings Cayman to this subsidiary, 1MDB PetroSaudi. 3 days before, on the 25th of September, 3 days before. What I have not seen is any evidence that any money transferred between these two companies, and I can't quite understand why they would have made the loan. What was necessary? You know, why was it necessary to make a loan? Purely in order to remove the money afterwards. So I don't think there was any money transferred. And one needs to bear in mind also that the valuation of 2.9 billion was completely false. It was based on false information. And in fact, there was very little cash flow in PetroSaudi at all. They were relying on a loan in order to do the limited amount of business they were actually doing. They had one project, I think, in Argentina at the time, and they were relying on a loan to do that. So, you know, if the holding company paid 700 million, where did it come from? So, you know, if that helps answer. And I think something that's also relevant is that, yes, what happened was that inquiries were made as to where the money, this repayment, should go to. And again, White and Case drew up the documents. The lawyer who led the team from White and Case, I should explain, now works as a director at PetroSaudi. He changed his job straight after the deal. But at the time, he was working for this prominent London law firm. And he drew up these documents which involved demanding this repayment of the loan. And it kind of drawn up in the same handful of days that the loan was made. And so that was kind of laid on the desk of Cheryl Halmy, you know, the moment the signing took place. And so Cheryl Halmy's next question is, oh, where do I pay to? And the response was, well, you know, the 300 million that's left out of that billion, that, you know, we'll need something to operate PetroSaudi 1MDB with. So that goes into PetroSaudi's operating account in Geneva. Now that's 700 billion. We're going to put that into one of our different accounts. They called it an affiliate account, and maybe we should just sort of look up the definition of an affiliate company, but it sounds a bit loose. Anyway, this affiliate account was Good Start. It was, and Cheryl Halmy knew that because when the bank that took receipt of that 700 million, which was Coutts Bank in Zurich, asked about who was the beneficial owner of this account, of this money that was coming in, Cheryl Halmy wrote directly to his bankers, Deutsche Bank in KL, and said, tell Coots that it's Good Star Limited, Mahe Shaz. So he knew that, and frankly, I don't know, but did he not have a company structure for PetroSaudi International to see that Good Star was not a subsidiary of theirs? I don't know. But he certainly had been told that Good Star was where PetroSaudi wanted the money to go. You know, it's a sort of sleight of hand, isn't it? I suppose, you know, that's one of our companies, that's where we want the money paid back. Well, it wasn't one of their companies. That was the point. That company belongs, well, is controlled certainly by Joe Lowe, which, you know, explains why Joe Lowe initiated the whole maneuver, doesn't it? It was Joe Lowe who introduced 1MDB to PetroSaudi. It was Joe Lowe who gained a promise from PetroSaudi that they were happy to be used as a front.
Okay, Claire, thank you very much for that. Just one more response from the floor. This question says, isn't it better if you have any further information that you reveal it now? Because you've got more than 1,000 people in the room waiting for a new expose?
Well, I put out a new expose a couple of hours back, which was this connection between ABAR and Good Star. ABAR is the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund that has been brought in time and again to 1MDB's operations. It has always been presented at the very highest levels, you know, by the Prime Minister, Finance Minister himself, that, you know, 1MDB is all about getting all that lovely Arab wealth to be invested in wonderful, promising Malaysia, so that, quote, hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs for Malaysians could be provided. I don't think we've seen a cent of genuine investment. We've seen money lent at exorbitant rates. But ABAR has been involved in a lot of these transactions, and indeed ABAR also was involved in the buying out of a large section of our BH Bank, and the chief executive of ABAR has come to KL a number of times in the guise of being involved in this joint venture injection of Arab money into Malaysia over the last few years. So in that context, and given what we know about Joe Lowe's involvement now with 1MDB and Good Star, I think it's a valid question. I have now received a considerable body of new information, that part of which shows that Good Star paid a fairly hefty, I mean, $20 million, you know, it is quite a lot of money. So it would be fair to ask what that was for, particularly as the money into Good Star quite clearly came from 1MDB in large part. Revealing stuff, you know, I have to be careful. I have to be careful what I say. I have to test what I say. There's a great deal of material. It's confusing. I have to try and make it less confusing when I present it. So I provided that story this morning. I'm not going to come out with any shocking revelations here in the hall. If I have stuff, I will write it, and I will back it up as much as I can with documentary evidence. It's a better way of presenting information. So I hope you'll forgive me that.
So thank you very much. That was very insightful. I'm going to pass